Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are
HangingOnToHope.org. This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today, we brought Carissa Raderstorf back to the show. Carissa is the founder of Reset Ministries. Also, her husband, Jeff, are co-hosts of their podcast, Resetology. You can listen to Emotional and Spiritual Healing number 147 and 148. And she also did an amazing podcast called Soul Ties with us not too long ago. That was number 169 and 170. I love that one. Carissa is an ordained pastor with an MAE from Olivet Nazarene University, as well as graduate certificates in professional counseling and executive coaching and consulting from the Townsend Institute of Leadership and Counseling at Concordia University at Irvine. Carissa also leads the Reset Retreats, and they have one coming up, Reset Together, and offers personalized coaching. I listened to the podcast you did on safe people, and I just feel like it's such an important topic to talk about with trauma and abuse victims. So welcome back to the show, Carissa.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys asking me back.
Yes, welcome back. This is Karen. It's so good to have you on again.
Yeah, always good to be with you too.
I know you have a retreat coming up. Did you want to start by telling our listeners more about this and how they can attend?
Sure. We have our Reset Retreat coming up on September 20th and 21st. So it's Friday night, 6 to 9, and then Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it's really about walking through your life story with God and just unpacking. Honestly, it's like kind of like detangling lies from truth, because of the areas that we get wounded and hurt in our life. Those are the very areas where we buy into lies about ourselves, about our identity, about God, about other people. And so we're kind of walking through our life story and asking God questions, and there's prayer exercises and things that we tangibly do to help ourselves heal. But we go through topics like about our thought patterns, strongholds, parent wounds, shame, releasing judgments that we maybe have about ourselves or other people, freedom through forgiveness, soul ties, which we did an episode on that recently with you all. And then we also talk about spiritual warfare. So what part does that play in our healing process? And then we talk about the person of the Holy Spirit, because the Bible says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. So it's not the absence of all of our problems, but it's the presence of someone. And so it culminates in a session on the Holy Spirit. So we've been doing these off and on, mostly on since 2015, and have seen a lot of people get some really big breakthroughs. So it's full of worship, short teachings, testimonies, and then these interactive experiences. And so, I would love for any of your listeners to come join us. It's in the Moon Valley area in Phoenix.
Sounds great.
And you said that there's going to be a painter coming?
Yeah, this time is really special because there's a painter, William Butler. He's doing a live art experience. So he'll be painting off and on throughout the retreat, but the painting will culminate at the end of the second day. And he has literally painted from coast to coast. He's been doing this for 20 years, and he's raised over $300,000 for nonprofits through his paintings. So the painting will be available at the end of the weekend. So super excited to have him. Him and his wife, they're just it's like being with Jesus when you're around them.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And a violinist, you said, that's super.
Yeah, I've got a really great violinist that is coming, and the worship team is amazing too. So it's going to be a really special weekend. But registration is required because we have packets for you. So just make sure that you can go to our website, resetministries.us, and you can find all the information there.
All right. And is there a cost for it?
Yeah, you get to set your own fee because we're a nonprofit organization. We're able to do things in a way where we have a lot of donors that help pay for things, but we also try to cover the cost, especially if a retreat is a little bit expensive. for us. So yeah, set your own fee. You get to pick the price, and the bottom price just covers our fee. So very affordable.
And what's the last day you can register for it?
If we leave it open until the day of, but
Okay.
please don't do that to us.
Don't wait till the day of.
So we go to your website?
Yeah, go to the website.
Okay.
And it's there. There's 5 classes that you watch online before you come. You don't have to, but we really recommend it. We call it the prep course. And so those really help prepare your heart for the weekend.
Oh, that's cool.
Those are actually available on our website. Like, you don't have to register to watch them. So if you're on the fence, I encourage you at least just watch the first one. It's on God's voice, and that helps you tune in to the process that we'll go through. And that'll give you a good idea of what the weekend's like.
Is it reset dot? It's not .org, right? It's
resetministries.us.
.us. I knew it was different than .org.
Mhm.
Okay, so resetministries.us. Okay, so you heard that, everyone. We got to go there after sign up. So that's amazing that it's local. All right. So now we're going to start on talking about safe people, which means we're going to talk about what an unsafe person is too. So I feel like this is really, really important, especially for me. Continuing with part 2.
So in talking about boundaries, which I think is another important thing to talk about, which we've done a podcast on that too, but why are they so important when it comes to safe people? And I love how you give the example of them being like a yard. Did you want to expound on that? I love, my favorite book is the Boundaries book.
Right. Yeah. And that's grabbed out of the air, that analogy, but it's such a good one. And, I couldn't think of anything better.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of property lines, that when you have a property line, you know exactly where your yard starts and stops. And so we go back to the verse from Proverbs about guarding our heart. Well, if we don't know what's in our heart, where do we draw the line? So it's a beautiful picture. It really helps me because I had a property line issue with my neighbor. So it helps me with the analogy too. And it's just because when we moved in, there was a huge tree between our houses, and we live in one of those homes where the houses are close. So the 2 roofs were like a funnel, and the leaves are just dumping down this funnel, but dumping on our patio and our porch. And it's a side of their house that they never go to. And so I was always paying someone to come clean it out. Always, and I had mentioned to them different times. And then I just thought, you know what? I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm tired of spending the money. I'm tired of doing it myself. And so the leaves piled up like 3 or 4 feet high. And then there were monsoons. And because the ground was so high, it flooded their house. I wasn't trying to do that, but it just happened that way. And then I heard from them. The owner actually lives in California. It's like, hey, your patio needs a gutter. And I very kindly no, it's the tree that I've been talking to you about. It's, I sent him pictures, and long story short, once I made the problem his problem, then something changed. He got the tree torn down. But that's such a parallel to guarding our heart, because I'm responsible for what's in my heart, my yard, if we're using the analogy. I'm not responsible for what's in my neighbor's yard, or even my husband or other family members or friends. I'm responsible for my yard. But if what's going on in their heart starts spilling into my life, then it becomes my problem. So if their anger problem starts spilling into my life, well, now I need to do something to push back. That's a boundary line, because it's spilling into my life. Or if their irresponsibility is starting to cost me a lot of money, and I'm not allowing that law of sowing and reaping to happen because I'm paying their bills or letting them stay in the house for free. Those are all boundary issues. And so when we realize that all this dumping is affecting our heart and our lives, and we give ourselves permission to push back, we're always going to get kickback, because now all of a sudden, like, all this junk, it's in their yard where it should be. It's their problem. And then now there's anger, and there's all this kickback from them. But that's what should help them change and grow. If I keep dealing with it, I keep raking up the leaves, I keep paying for it, it's never going to be their problem. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I think it
draw
does.
that
Really
analogy, but
I like that. And I like how you talked about in the podcast when you have the gate, and you can open the gate to allow who you want to come in and not. Did we talk about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that have had really loose boundaries and have gotten so used to their hearts being trampled on, whether that's emotions or they aren't in touch with their own preferences or, any of the things I mentioned, the limitations. And then they get permission to draw some boundaries. There's almost a fear of like, one is like, is that okay? Is that of God? But we need to realize, just like a property has a gate on it, so do our hearts. Like I can decide who can come into my heart and who can come out. Just because you put someone out of your yard for a season, if that pain that we talked about and the consequences makes them change and grow, well, I can open the gate back up, but I'm responsible for the gate. I determine who comes in and out of my life.
Yeah, I love that part of it. And I work with a lot of abuse victims when I go to court and whatever with them. And I remember talking to one of them, and maybe a couple times I remember saying, no, boundaries are one of the most loving things you can do. And they just don't believe me because they're still so in the abuse that they think, oh, they're going to be so upset with me.
Well, of course, abusers don't like boundaries. Like she said, they're going to kick back against it because it's not to their advantage.
So important, though, to anyone.
Or they're going to kick back hard, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
it's
hard.
To protect yourself. We need to do that. So when is it time to set a boundary?
One of the things I think is really, really cool about the way that God made us, we're made in his image. And that's just cool to begin with. But God has emotions. He gave us emotions. And sometimes emotions get a bad rap in Christianity, like don't be led by your feelings and that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of truth to that. Like, we want to be led by our faith and not our feelings, but our feelings are there for a reason. And so if anger keeps coming up, like that's a sense of protest in us that a boundary is being crossed or something's out of control, or sadness or frustration or, whatever the negative emotion is. A lot of times that's telling us that some line has been crossed. It's a natural way to feel if, like take, for instance, an adult child that has a substance abuse issue and is still living at home and mom's paying all the bills. And it's just creating this scenario where mom and dad are always frustrated, always upset. It's draining their money. Like there should be anger. There should be frustration. There should be like that record scratching on the inside of this is not okay. And so I think a lot of it is just listening to the way that God has wired us. I feel that sometimes when I'm with somebody who's a stranger and brings up a topic like a politics right now, and they start dialing in, I can tell they're a rigid thinker and I don't even know them. I'm just in the line with them at Starbucks or something. But I feel that sense of protest, like you're crossing, like you're pushing this on to me.
Right.
Now, how much more do we feel that in our personal relationships if it's a consistent pattern of just dumping?
Yeah.
So we just need to go with our feeling, like if it feel like we're being intruded on.
Well, I mean, that's part of it, is that dashboard of emotions inside us, the light starts going off, just like in a car, like check engine, low tire pressure. Like inside of us, it's like anger, frustration, fear, like those are constantly going off. Those are signals, like you need to pull over and see what's going on the inside and examine your heart, just like the Bible's telling us, like, okay, why am I feeling this way? David wrote that his innards instructed him. And I love that phrase because it's what we're talking about. Like, and that even happens with us physically. It's like our body's telling us you're breaking down, but emotionally, physically, like God has wired us in a way to have this sense of protest. So I think it's one way for sure. And then I think another one is having safe people in our life to hold us accountable and go, hey, that's not okay. Like the way that you're being treated, or the way that what's going on with you and your son. Like I can tell you're edgy, I can tell you're frustrated, but letting people into our life to speak into our life.
Yeah. And most of us, we've been abused. So we've been around so many unsafe people that it's also hard as well. We can set that boundary and we can listen to it, but we also need to enforce and keep that boundary. That's very, very important because we're so afraid to set it in the first place. And then they're so manipulative that they usually can weasel their way back right past that boundary. So we do need 100% what you just said, as many safe people as we can in our lives to make sure we're enforcing those boundaries with the unsafe people.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times I think there's a measure of control where the person who's being abused, the abuser is controlling them in a way to keep safe people away from them.
Mm-hmm.
So that exactly what you're talking about is not happening and they don't get found or caught or called out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, they're going to see the boundaries as negative. They don't see it like you see it. So they're never going to be like, "Oh, yeah, I like boundaries. Let's hear more
Right.
about it."
And that's why we're talking about this right now, because we just
Yeah.
hope, we're getting more and more listeners, and we just hope that this will click and register like, wait, I don't have any safe people. I need to find some more safe people to make
Yeah.
me accountable. I need to enforce these boundaries.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, why is it important to recognize safe and unsafe people and make sure we allow safe ones in?
I love the verse in Proverbs. It's Proverbs 13:20. He says, walk with the wise and become wise. A companion of fools suffers harm. And I think a modern way of saying that is stuff rubs off. So if you're around unsafe people all the time, it's going to rub off on you. But if you're around safe people, wise people, that's going to rub off too. Like healthy rubs off, unhealthy rubs off. And so, we tend to be the sum of people the collective sum of who we hang around with, right?
Oh, that's very true.
Yeah, that's what makes it hard for my kids is I see there's so much good in them and they've gone through so much therapy, but being around an unsafe, hopefully I didn't become when I was with him too much like him to where I imparted some good things to them. And I do see the good qualities and characteristics in them. So I am seeing the good parts and all the therapy that's helped them. So that's a bonus.
Yeah, I think too, it's maintaining our peace. It's just being around safe people. It's just like it's peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
But being around unsafe people is just can be so chaotic.
Yes.
And there's so much turmoil and strife. And the older I get, I'm like, I just want peace.
Yeah.
I want peace.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to figure out if someone's safe or unsafe is all that peace you don't feel and the drama and the problems and everything that's always coming from it.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know when we're crossing a boundary with other people?
Oh, yeah. How do we know when we're crossing a boundary? I like this one when you talked about this.
Yeah. So I'm going to flip this one back on you guys too. So we talked about how we know, like the alarm bells are going off, but how can we sense that in other people when we're crossing a boundary? Like, what are the body language and just the cues we look for where we can tell that we're kind of pushing a limit here?
I guess you would see something in the other person, like the irritation or resentment or something from another person.
And they're starting to shut down.
Yeah, I think that's a
back
big
away
one.
from you and being more quiet, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, body language for sure. A lot of times people kind of turn sideways, like their posture is even less open to you. And definitely eye contact. Notice people get pretty shifty with their eyes when they're uncomfortable or look away a lot, kind of look toward the door. And yeah, they shut down for sure. It's like they were really into the conversation and then now they're just not really talking much. And so that part of that too is just our own self-awareness of realizing, okay, I crossed the limit and then just kind of backpedaling and trying to make it right, or just dialing down whatever we're doing or like, oh, I'm sorry if I was coming across pushy. I'm kind of passionate about this topic, but your opinion's important too. What do you think? But just trying to keep it mutual, but it's really important to pay attention to when we're doing it to other people too.
Yeah. And it could be possible that someone could get angry too. I know an abuser could push it to the point where I would get, I could get angry. Like it was an abusive person.
Yeah.
For sure.
But I'm usually not the one that's making the person angry. I'm usually the people pleaser. So,
usually the one cowering.
I'm the cowering one, but I've gotten angry when I've been a little bullied before.
The thing about anger too, for some people, if we don't feel comfortable expressing anger, it's like it turns inward and it comes out as sadness or depression.
I think that's how I am for sure. I want to get more angry though. It might just happen. Oh no. How can we avoid labeling or judging or sounding like we are? Because that is true. When you're labeling safe and unsafe people, we're judging.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we need to be really careful about putting labels on people. definitely need to be careful about judging because we don't truly know what's going on inside someone's heart. In Matthew 7, that's that famous verse where Jesus says, "Judge not, lest you be judged. The measure you use will be measured against you." That's people that aren't even Christians. That's like their favorite book, a verse in the Bible. Judge not. But then in John, he says, "Judge correctly." So which one is it? It's both, because the one verse where it's "judge not," he talks about taking the plank out of your eye so that you can remove the speck out of somebody's eye. So it's all about dealing with your own character flaws, and which is really done in the presence of God and through discipleship and just dealing with our own lack of self-awareness problem. Bible calls it sanctification. But as we do that, our spiritual eyes are more open to spot it in other people, but it's not so that we can be critical and label and, judge people, because that's just being critical. That's putting ourselves in a place of superiority whenever we criticize. And it's really God's job to judge. But when Jesus says judge correctly, it's because we are supposed to make righteous judgments. You've been talking about abuse. So when you firsthand experience something, you should make a judgment. Like this person can't be trusted. That's not the kind of judgment that God's saying, or Jesus is saying, well, don't make a judgment about that. No, you experienced it. You saw it. You witnessed it. You felt it. So in your heart and mind, you should make that judgment. They can't be trusted, and you need to make boundaries and back off and do the things to be safe. But I think that's different than just throwing out labels and saying it to other people. And I think that's a whole lot different, because I think in this day and age, we're pretty loose about putting labels on people, even throwing around psychological terms to define people that we're upset with. And so I don't know if that helps.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, we need to actually, as abuse victims, have that ability to righteously judge. Otherwise, we cannot protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Right. Yeah.
We need to protect
That's about
ourselves.
evaluating. Like you're evaluating someone's behavior. And then again, based on firsthand experience, you make a judgment. But I think the don't judge part in Matthew 7 is more about not dealing with our own stuff first and just projecting and labeling other people.
Right. Or just talking about them like gossip, almost like, well, that person's,
Like a lot of what's going on.
We shouldn't be doing that for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's definitely what's going on in our country right now.
How would you describe the best relationships?
I think we kind of talked about this earlier. It's all those characteristics of safe people and just the ability to be yourself. Yeah, the best relationships have direct, healthy communication.
How can we avoid bringing in old baggage when we are guarding our hearts? All of our listeners, including Karen and I, struggle with the old baggage. Definitely.
That's a big question. Here's my first response. Go to the reset retreat.
That's the answer.
We'll be
That's
there.
the answer. But a lot of that has to do with what we were just talking about in Matthew 7. It's dealing with our own, what's going on inside of us, whether that's healing, whether that's judgments that we've made about ourselves or God or other people based on our past hurts. Because what can happen is we can be in a relationship with someone who's really abusive and we don't trust them. And so we've made a judgment of not trustworthy. It's kind of like a rubber stamp. And it's a righteous judgment for that person. But then we go out into the world and interact with people and somebody resembles them in some way, their personality, or they're just the same sex as that person. We take out that rubber.
Are you talking to me right now, Carissa? I did not say all men were the same. No.
But yeah, it's so easy to take that rubber stamp and go, not trustworthy, not every man.
But that's not true.
So,
I do have another friend that does that too. It's not just me. Another one puts that stamp on them all.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can do it about all kinds of things.
But we will as abuse victims bring in the old baggage, and we have to really be careful of
Yeah.
that. And we really have to look at it because it really could be true what that person's doing, or it could be old baggage. And so maybe we still need to continue therapy or whatever while we're going through
Yeah, well, we always
relationship.
need to keep working on our own issues.
Yeah,
you know?
because we have to realize whether it's true or not. Like, is it old baggage or is it true?
Yeah.
Because if it's true, then we need to put a boundary up and stay away from that person. They're unsafe.
Yeah.
So that's the hard
And
thing.
at the same time, like put a boundary up with them because they're unsafe. But
Mhm.
then go on that healing journey that you're talking about so that when you encounter other people, you don't have that same boundary or that same wall or that same rubber stamp out
Yeah.
so that you're not letting somebody in that is safe, you know. And I think that's the trap that a lot of people fall into when they've been through hard things or trauma or abuse or whatever it is that we do carry this stuff with us, and then it changes the way that we see people in the world and ourselves, and we're still seeing through those eyes. And so it's only going through that deep work with God and taking those planks out, healing those things, that we can see people again the way that they really are.
Yeah.
And that part is a journey. We do a session at the retreat called Your Destiny Has a Scarecrow. We talk about this very topic, and we named it that because scarecrows, they're planted right above where there's treasure in a field or a harvest, because the crows come in and they steal stuff away. And if a crow was smart, what the crow would actually do is just fly around and look for scarecrows, because wherever there's a scarecrow, there's treasure and there's harvest there. And that's really a picture of what happens in our heart. It's like the very areas where we're wounded the deepest are typically the places where God wants to bless us. But we have these scarecrows in our memory that are just, don't go near men, or don't take this risk. Don't let people in. People can't be trusted. This race or this gender or this socioeconomic group, like it's just screaming at us to not let people into that space. But it's usually a place where God wants to bless us.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's
That's
very
good
true.
to know. Yeah, I like that.
Very true.
You do say to let the grace of God work in someone's life because we've not always been safe people ourselves. And you give an example of Paul and Mark. There's a fine line here for our listeners because we do not want to give grace to unsafe people from our past. Narcissists, sociopaths, and compulsive liars and manipulators, they usually don't change. So on this one, we do need to be really careful and keep the boundaries up. I know I am so easily manipulated by people, and they will continually lie to the point that you'll believe them. I would say veer on the side of caution and limit or no contact unless necessary. Anything you wanted to add on that, Carissa?
Yeah, I think you need to look at the kind of person that you're dealing with. In Proverbs, it talks about foolish, wise, and then evil people. And, foolish people, there are so many verses about foolish people in Proverbs. And they don't listen to feedback. They don't change. They have a short learning curve. But then there's also evil people that they really are out to get you. Just like your list there of sociopaths, compulsive liars, manipulators. Like they really are out to get you. And those people need absolute boundaries. Like you're not coming through the gate again. And so you need to determine what kind of person that you're dealing with. Our hope is someone who's foolish at some point will, have their face in the pig pen long enough, like the prodigal, to go, okay, I want to change, and if we see the patterns changing and we have stuff that we can point out and go, yeah, they're making strides. Well, then we determine with that gate, how much do we let them in or not? We don't just let them all the way back in, but trust can be built back over time, but we have to use wisdom in that. And it's all the things that we've been talking about. Look for the qualities, have people in your life to hold you accountable. The friend that I mentioned earlier that's been going through that really difficult relationship, she has told a handful of us that are close to her, if you ever see me ever doing anything like this again, getting to this type of relationship, you have absolute right to speak into my life and talk to me. But she's setting up guardrails because she doesn't want to go back to what one was.
Yeah, that's wise.
Yeah, I don't want to go back to that either.
So we'd like to thank you for coming back on the show. The topics you cover are so important. I mean, I know for me, just having you go over all this has been really helpful. I know we talked about this a little at the beginning, but how can people find you and be a part of this amazing ministry?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. It's always good to be with you guys. It really is. Love your heart for healing, and especially people that have been through trauma. So I appreciate what you do. But yeah, you can follow us. We're pretty active on social media. So resetministries.us, Instagram and Facebook. We have a YouTube channel as well. It's Reset Ministries -US. Apparently you can't use period in there. And then our website is the same. But we do have a lot of resources and teachings. And then our Resetology podcast is available wherever podcasts are. So you can find us there. But yeah, we'd love your listeners to jump over and join us too.
Yeah, absolutely. The only one thing I was thinking in my mind that I didn't mention is like, as we went through this list of safe and unsafe people, I mean, I think, I'm not sure, but there are probably things that are unsafe about me as well that I hope that I can change and bring to the Lord, and, you know, hope everybody's open-minded to. None of us are perfect, but, and we all need to work on ourselves. But yeah, this is just a good guideline too.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up a good point. Maybe this is the best closing thought, is the best way to attract safe people is to be a safe person.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
That's hopeful too, because we can control that.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back to the show, and we will get this out, and hopefully everyone will come to the retreat.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Great.
I'll be there.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Safe ones in.
Well, how can we avoid bringing in old?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Let me try this again.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.